Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to Your City, Your County. I'm Bob Gray, and we're very pleased to have two guests with us today. The one that you can see here already is Amber, and Amber is Amber Shallow. She's the city treasurer of Algoma. It's very nice to have you
Nice
with
to
us
see you,
today.
Bob.
Thank you. And we also have with us Matt Murphy, who's the city administrator. Good to have you with us today, too.
Thank you, Bob.
You bet. How long, Matt, have you been in this particular position as city administrator?
I started in July, I do believe it was. It seems like it was a week ago, but I believe it full time. I moved down here in July out of the Public Works Department. I still take over a lot of that, but work with Casey Gressel has kind of taken a different job into a more management position where he oversees some of the day-to-day stuff. And I work with Casey probably on a day-to-day basis, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great.
So-
Well, I know this is the first time we've talked to you as the city administrator, so.
Yes, it is.
It's good. We look forward to that. And also Amber Shallow. Amber is with us today. And Amber, you've been the city treasurer for how long now?
9 years.
Has it
Little
been
over
that
9
long?
years.
That's
Yes.
amazing.
Yep. I started back in October of 2013 as assistant deputy clerk treasurer, then became deputy clerk treasurer, then treasurer.
Wow, that's a good buildup.
Mm-hmm.
And I should also say, Amber, that usually you are working the cameras behind the scenes.
I
but
do,
This
so,
time you
yep.
are the star.
Yes, I do. I volunteer with the cable department and back and help record the council meetings. And we used to have someone who came in to record these shows, and she moved away. And so we kind of had to backfill with me during the day when you guys are here. Luckily, it's only once a month, so it's not a huge burden. But
Well, you've always done good work, with
Thanks.
what you have to work with here. Thank you. The main topic we're going to talk about today is a new project that's starting, and it's across from where Denny's Super Value is, in case people wonder, which is that's what, Fifth.
it is Fifth
It
Street
is Fifth.
between Clark and Steele.
Yes,
That's
okay,
correct.
thank you. And maybe you could just get us started a little bit on how this whole project started. It's
Sure.
going to be development for housing,
That is
basically.
correct,
And
yeah.
I think, like I say, to get started, how did it come about?
So back in, I want to say about 2016, 17, when Jeff Wiswell was our city administrator, he had identified that block as having a lot of blighted properties. So the homes weren't in the greatest condition. They're very close together, not a lot of yard space. And when you went down the alley, it was very apparent that there was blight in that block. And so he actually was approached by a developer about redeveloping that property into some higher density housing. And that developer just couldn't get enough of the people on the block to agree to sell their properties to make it worth his time. So he kind of backed away. And then it was early 2019, the county administrator, Scott Feld, approached the city and said, hey, at that time Jeff Wiswell had moved on. He was no longer with us. And he came to us and said, Jeff was working on a grant application. We have some closed grant funds. So Community Development Block Grant had given out all these housing grants to different area municipalities and government entities.
Is that a federal program?
It was federal funds, and it was passed through the state and then down to the counties and the cities, municipalities. And if you weren't using them for revolving loan funds anymore for home improvements, you had to give the money back. But before you gave it back, you could offer it to municipalities in your jurisdiction. So the county went out to Casco, Luxembourg, Kewanee, Algoma, all the municipalities here in our county, and said, we've got these, they called them closed grant funds because it was closing out the program.
Mm-hmm.
But it had to be used for very specific items, and one of the items was blight elimination. So we hired a consultant who went out and actually did a review of that whole block and identified which properties were blighted, and more than 50% of the block was blighted, in a blighted condition, so we qualified for the grant funds. We were then able to use those closed grant funds as a matching to a public facilities CDBG grant from the state.
And when you say close, you mean CLOSE,
Yeah, yeah,
not closed.
yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the money we got from the county was about $696,000, and then the public facilities grant that we applied for was $1 million, and that requires a 50% match. So that's where the closed grant funds came in. It gave us that match requirement.
Oh, okay.
So all in all, we had just shy of $1.7 million. We got the final award in October of '21, but because closed grant funds were involved, we had a very tight timeline, and all the construction, demolition, everything had to be done by December 31st of '22.
Ooh.
So we had to boogie this
Uh-huh.
last year to get that all done.
Did
So-
you have to get out there with your hammer and crowbar or
Thankfully,
anything?
I didn't.
No.
Matt was out there quite a
Good.
bit.
Okay. Matt, maybe you can get us started a little bit on how did the actual construction or deconstruction, I guess we'd say, began.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a pretty simple way to spend $1.7 million or just under $1.7 million, but there's a lot of moving parts that goes into it, and because you're using federal funds passed down through the state to the county into the hands of the city of Algoma, there's a lot of criteria and a lot of different things that you have to meet to be able to do this. And it wasn't just a matter of removing the houses or the blighted property. There was some infrastructure work that needed to be updated and changed as well. So there was actually 3 different bids that the city reached out to contractors for, and the first one was the bid to demolition to remove the properties that were currently on the block. So that was one of our bids. And before anything could be removed, we actually had to put a bid together and a document specs to have all the abatement done, lead paint, asbestos. So every house had to be looked at for asbestos abatement. And so, I mean, there was a lot of moving parts and a lot of documents that had to get put together. And then the third piece of that side of the house or that side of the project was to look at the actual infrastructure upgrades. Every one of these houses had a sanitary lateral. Every one of these houses had a water main or a water service going to it for a residential. We had to look at upsizing our mains to service water coming in to the new facilities or what is going to be in place there, and sanitary. So some upsizing, some stormwater work, everything kind of, like Amber really said, is the time crunch of getting this all done by December 31st of '22. There were a lot of long days, and I think, CDBG funding is a great opportunity. It's great funding to have, but dealing with the Department of Administration there's a lot of behind the scenes work. If I have probably 80, 90 hours in a 2-week pay period out on the streets, Amber probably has 2/3 of that in the office behind the scenes on the phone, dealing with the contractors, dealing with our engineering firm, making sure all of these things that are in place, all these documents, wage assignments, Davis-Bacon, federal wage rates. So there's a lot of it but we were able to get it all done. We had, I think, a final pay app from our contractor, I think, the last week in November, I think. And everything is moving forward now. And you can see what you currently see today is pretty much 3/4 of that whole RDA block is vacant and grass planted, awaiting our next project.
Okay. Let me get back to you for a minute, Amber. These homes had to be purchased, right?
They did.
Was
Yep.
that by the city?
Yes, so the grant funds that we received did help and assist in that purchase, and because the homeowners didn't have a choice. We were purchasing under the threat of eminent domain, so if they
Okay.
refused to sell, we would go through the courts to do eminent domain to get the properties. So because there was threat of eminent domain involved, the CDBG program dictates what we have to do. First, we had to get an appraisal on the property. Then we had to offer them an offering price, and we had certain parameters that we could go within under the grant guidelines. And we were able to come to agreements with every single property owner that, on a purchase price without having to go to eminent
Oh,
domain,
that's,
thankfully.
that's good.
So,
That makes
yeah.
people feel better
Yep.
then.
And we did hear from quite a few of the property owners that they were very pleased with the offers. They, in most cases, were probably more than they would have gotten selling on the private market. And then in addition to the purchase price, they all received money to move from the properties.
Mm-hmm.
So we had quite a few of them were rental properties, and at least two that I'm aware of used their replacement housing payments to purchase homes.
Oh,
And
that's
and
great.
both of them said, had it not been for this, we would have never been able to buy a home. We'd still be renting.
What a great
So,
opportunity for
yep.
these people.
Yeah. So it kind of helped put a little bit of cherry on a sticky
Yeah,
situation.
yeah.
So,
And I noticed, Matt, let me get back to you a little bit, that some of the homes on the block were still left. 2 or 3 homes that are still there. They were in better shape, is that right?
Yes, so the 3 houses that you still remain, that still remain on the southwest quadrant, third, I guess you would say, of that block, or quarter of that block, there's 3 houses there that, they didn't meet the blight criteria, and those 3 property owners chose to keep their houses and wanted to stay there. So it was a benefit, I think, to them, and it was a benefit to what we were trying to do on the entire block. It, I think, worked for all parties interested in it, and those 3 houses will be staying there currently.
Well, that's great. And I remember talking to one of the officials from the city initially, and they were saying that that what they were planning on was that the first part would be like more apartments, and then behind that, as you've described, is more housing in the form of like a duplex or a triplex, I guess. So kind of changing neighborhoods from apartments to homes, and then, of course, moving on to the rest of the city, which generally is homes or rentals.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what now, where the homes were on the alley divided it in half, the whole half to the east, or facing Denny's grocery store there, that will be now a 32-unit apartment. That will have 16 one-bedroom apartments inside of that whole half of the block, 8 two-bedroom and 8 three-bedroom apartments, with a 3-story building, but the at-grade level, or the first floor that's right at grade, will be 47 covered parking stalls. So if you're looking at it from the outside, it'll look like a 3-story apartment, but the bottom story, or the first story at grade, is actually all just parking, and then the 2 stories of apartments above it. So.
Wow.
And then if you're on the northwest quadrant, that'll be 4 more like townhomes. Some 2 and 3 bedroom, 3 2 and 3 bedroom combinations, and 1 2 and 4 bedroom combination. That'll be more like townhouse living with some parking in the back. And I think it's actually going to turn out really well. That whole west side of the block will still look more like some similar style homes, with the east side of the block being more of an apartment complex.
And that part where the 2 or 3 family homes, that's like on Steel Street and 6th, something?
they'll all
I
face
hate
six.
to put you into too much here, but just so people can kind of figure out where it is.
I apologize, Bob.
That's
What-
okay.
What is the
All-
question
All
again?
4 buildings will face Sixth
Sixth,
Street.
yes,
They'll face
Yep,
yes,
they'll
they
all
will.
face
Yes, the
Yes,
2
I
and
got
3
you.
bedroom townhomes will all be facing 6th Street or Perry Field.
Okay. Where are we in the process right now?
So that's a great question. That's probably the question that we're getting.
You've heard that
the mo-
occasionally.
We have on a daily, or for sure weekly basis. But where we're at right now, like I said, we have the block turned into green space right now. What you're going to see developed has a straw mat on it. There has been grass planted after the contractors have been done. The roads have new curb and blacktop on them. There will be sidewalk going all the way around that block, but that sidewalk will not go in until a lot of the heavy outdoor construction phase is done of the apartment and the townhouses. And then we will be putting sidewalk back in there. But as far as where we are right now, I think, turn it over to Amber is really driving this kind of next steps here with our developer.
Okay, we'll turn
So-
it back to you.
Okay.
Amber?
We have some paperwork wrap-up stuff to do on the grant. Probably have about 2 more months worth of paperwork to do to wrap up the demolition and public facilities infrastructure work. The work itself is done, but now you gotta do all the reports and the financial data and all that stuff. We have already put out through the redevelopment authority a request for developers to redevelop this property. That was done this past summer, and they chose Commonwealth companies out of the 2 developers that did respond. We sent the request out to 40, I think it was 40 developers, and 2 of them actually submitted proposals. Commonwealth and one other company. Commonwealth was the chosen one, and they had submitted a timeline to hopefully be building by late 2023, early 2024, and they're expecting about a 12-month construction period. One of the reasons Commonwealth was chosen is because they provided a larger number of parking spaces than the other developer, but they also do everything in-house. They have their own construction crews, they have their own management crews, so it's gonna be like an all-in-one package. They don't have to try and find someone to build this for them. They've already got them on hand.
And with the limited staff that Algoma has, I mean, it's
That's
not
a huge help.
huge city,
Yeah.
that has to be a big help.
Yep.
Having one company that you can turn to and probably one or
Correct.
2 or 3 individuals
Yep.
that you can deal with.
So part of the project is that the city will sell the land to the developer for $1,
Okay.
and then they will develop it, and in turn, we get tax revenue from that property. So there is going to be some tax increment financing that we're gonna have to look at doing. Number 1, to finish off the sidewalk, possibly some stormwater work, we're not quite sure. And then depending on the financing source from the developer, there may need to be some financial assistance to make these apartments affordable. For our real aim is to make sure that these are affordable for low to moderate income and senior citizens.
Mhm.
So, and we've already got some low-income properties in town, so we're really looking more towards what's referred to by the state as workforce development housing. So workforce is more your middle income is the target of it.
How do you determine who pays what?
So it would be income-based, and this is, the developer will have to take care of all of this. Nothing will come through the city, it'll all be in their hands. But they are basing it off of income, and the rental prices are gonna be based off the median income household for Kewaunee County. So there's some numbers that the state puts together, and that's what they have to rely on in order to meet their requirements from the state, because they're also applying for tax credits from the state to help make this project work. They have to adhere to those income limits, and I think they have like 20 years after we turn it over to them that they have to maintain that. So it's not like this is gonna be, for the next 2 years, and then the rents are gonna skyrocket and go to market rates. It's a 20-year outlook.
That they have to.
They have to maintain
That
that
they have
income
to do
limits.
what they call the LMI, which
Yep.
you explained, low to moderate income.
Yep.
Can someone also rent one of these even though they don't fall in that category?
They can, but I think Commonwealth is aiming for all of them to be LMI.
LMI?
So
Okay.
they have to, under the rules of the grants and the income tax credits, 51% or more of the units have to be. So if they decide that, we don't have enough LMI applicants to fill this, they can rent out the other ones at market rate, as long as 51% or more of the units are LMI.
Yeah, I know that there is such a shortage at this point of rentals that's been influencing, and I know up in Door County as well, that you don't have enough places either for sale or for rent, and it certainly has involved the community, and somebody wants a job, and they say, but the closest I can get to rent is in Green Bay somewhere.
Yeah, and that kind of really is what started this whole process, even, before Jeff looked at this particular block, is we identified in our last comprehensive plan update that housing is a real issue, and it has been, and that hasn't changed. In fact, it's probably even gotten worse. And not just housing in and of itself, but affordable housing. People in the middle income brackets just can't afford properties anymore, or the rent is so sky high that they can't afford to put anything away to maybe eventually buy. So that was part of the target of this redevelopment, was to make affordable housing for people.
Is there any kind of guarantee? I mean, you say, yeah, we'll sell you the land for $1. Is there any kind of guarantee that goes with that? That yes, we will, that this Commonwealth company will indeed build
Yeah.
the buildings?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So we have the purchase agreement that says they have to maintain it as LMI. They will have a deed restriction that actually has to be filed on the property. So if Commonwealth were to sell it in the future to someone else, they have to maintain those same restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will also be putting into place a developer's agreement before we turn the property over to them officially, giving them targets that they have to meet. How many units they have to have, what is the low to moderate income ratio that they have to have for the number of units, and how long that has to be maintained. So they're gonna get hit with the deed restrictions from the state level, the developer restrictions from the city level, and then whatever else they've got
Yeah.
on their books.
And so a lot of the rent material really at this point is impossible to tell
Correct.
what the rents might be. It'll be determined by the time that the building is completed.
Yep, and it'll be redetermined each year.
Mhm.
So it's based off the median household income for Kewaunee
Okay.
County.
So your rent could go up or it could
It could.
conceivably go down?
Yep.
Okay. What kind of timeline exactly are we looking for? I got the impression maybe 2025, something like that?
Yeah, the Commonwealth is currently submitting their application to the state for the low to moderate income housing tax credit program, which
Mhm.
will give them some money to help build this property. That gets submitted, I think, in January sometime is the deadline, so they'll probably find out if they receive that credit or not in, I'd say, May, June, maybe July, because it got pushed back a little bit this year. They are hoping, if they receive it, that they'll start submitting all their plans and everything in the fall of 2023. And then construction will begin as soon as they have everything in place. So
Mhm.
2023 might be a little bit of a push for construction to start. They're saying 2024, but we're pushing them to start as fast as possible
Sure.
because there is a demand for this, and we're already
Oh, yeah.
receiving calls. When can we get on a waiting list?
Yeah.
Well,
What about that? Do you have a waiting list? Speaking
wait,
of
so the
just,
city does not. Everything
We could have
will-
a full waiting list, but we don't.
But you don't. Okay.
I did talk to one of the gentlemen from Commonwealth, and he said they will start a waiting list once they get closer to having that date of when they'll be finished. So probably won't have a waiting list for another year yet. But
Mhm.
once it gets closer, then they'll start a waiting list, and
Okay,
you
so-
can call Commonwealth. And once
Okay.
we get to that point, they will give the information to the city so we can pass it on as well.
Okay. So don't call now.
Don't call right now. I mean, you can. I'll tell you all just
We'll
what
tell
I
you the
know
same
now.
thing.
Yeah. Don't call Amber, don't call Matt.
Yeah. We are getting it. It's great to see the amount of interest that we're having in the calls that we are getting, because it just shows that there is that much of a need for it. There are that many people looking for places to rent. So it's great to see. The unfortunate thing is, and I think to echo a little bit of what Amber said, is this will be 100% Commonwealth's. You'll be going on a waiting list through Commonwealth. You're always welcome to call the city. We can try to answer the questions we can. But once this really gets up and gets going with our developer, Commonwealth really drives this train moving forward. You're not renting from the city of Algoma, you're renting from Commonwealth.
Yes.
So it was the city's property. It will become eventually here Commonwealth's property, with those restrictions and timelines of what they need to have in place moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Can you give me the size of the units, kind of?
Yeah.
Square footage and how many
So-
bedrooms and?
And this isn't set in stone, this was part of their proposal. So as part of this whole process, they'll be working with the redevelopment authority on what the outside's gonna look like, what the unit makeup is gonna be. But their aim is to have 675 square foot one-bedroom units, 890 square foot two-bedroom units, 1,240 square foot, 3-bedroom units. And then over in the townhomes, the 3 bedrooms will be about 1,220 square feet, and the 4-bedroom will be 1,420 square feet.
Wow.
So they're decent-sized places. These
Yeah.
aren't gonna be, tiny little things.
It's not going to be a tiny house.
No.
No.
It'll be a nice, comfortable living space for
That's
people.
great. I think it's going to be a real advantage, for the city and for the workers. And there's really been, obviously, your time has been spent on this, but it's not like the city of Algoma has spent, a lot of their own money on this. It's
No.
been grants
To
primarily.
date, it has been primarily grants. We did, the bids came in, they were a little high. They were
Yeah.
higher than our grants.
Yeah, we were exactly, I think under $100,000 though, for what we expected them to be. Things from when this started and what we've kind of budgeted, things have really changed.
Yeah.
Coming out of the pandemic, where we were budgeting prior to the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, I think it came out better than we expected it to. We had a little scare here of, oh boy, where is this going to land? And you were starting to hear bids really come back, and price of not only what the price of infrastructure material has gone up, if we could even get it. In this time frame that we were working on, you're listening to contractors, we can't even get pipe. So being under that threshold of time crunch, and everything really had to fall into the months or the weeks, right down to the days, to make sure that we could get this wrapped up. If this didn't get done, we couldn't do, plan B, and couldn't move on to plan C, and have to have this blacktopped this late fall prior to plants closing down for the year. All had to be completed to fall under our grant timeline. I feel like it really turned out a lot better than it could have with the original
Yeah.
scares back in June. Like, are we even going to be able to get pipe? Are we even, but it turned out really well.
Good. And I imagine it's been kind of a learning curve for you both. Maybe, huh?
It's
Definitely.
I don't know about a curve or a 90-degree turn.
Well, I think we've covered the project. Is there anything that I haven't, or that we haven't talked about that you feel is significant?
The only other thing I would like to let people know is what's going to be included with that, especially with the apartment complex.
Oh, yes,
There's a
yes,
lot of
of
amenities
course.
that this developer is offering. One of the really top things that kind of piqued everyone's interest was in-unit laundries. So they won't have to go to a shared laundry system. Now,
Wow.
as they're going through it and as they start looking at costs of things, that might have to change. But that is one of their goals, is to try and provide in-unit laundries. They will also have an on-site manager to take care of problems. They won't necessarily be there 40 hours a week, but they will have an on-site manager
So
to
you don't
assist.
have to call Green Bay or
Correct.
something like
Yeah.
that.
They are going to have a community room and an exercise facility, a business center, and an area for people to have events. If there's not enough space in their apartment, they can go down to a community room for events. And then they are also looking at luxury vinyl plank flooring and a smart key building unit entry. So this isn't going to be like your low income, build it as cheap as possible. They're actually trying to build a really nice
Yeah.
facility here that someone would be proud to call home.
That's great, and it helps the city, and I would think too, from a social situation of people living with somebody else in the building, and you make friends, and maybe you get together and have a party or an event, or play
Yeah.
cards together, and it sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Put me down. Anyway, I think we've about run out of time, and it has gone so fast today. But I want to thank both of you. Matt, thank you again.
Thank
I
you, Bob.
appreciate it.
Appreciate your
And,
time.
And as well as you, Amber, thank
Yeah,
you very
thank you,
much.
Bob.
I appreciate it. And next time we'll see you behind the cameras over there. You always do a fine job. And your son, I understand Richard
is
is
filling
doing
in
it
today, yes.
he and Al Reinhardt are
Yep.
they're doing their thing. So thanks everybody. Have a great day. See you later.